I was born in the former Soviet Union in the country of Ukraine. And when I was about 10 years old, my parents took me and seven of my siblings and immigrated to America. Basically, came here as refugees seeking religious freedom, as the Soviet Union wasn't very open to things like that. Really didn't listen to a whole lot of music back in Ukraine because to own like a tape player or a real player or something was a big deal. Coming from a big family, food and clothing came before everything else. So we were really starved in terms of our exposure for music. I remember the house that we lived in, that's where I really started to discover music. I just started listening to the radio and I had no idea what they were singing about. I did not speak English at the time, but I just really enjoyed the melodies and the harmonies. And I think that's where I got bit by the music bug and immediately wanted to somehow either create music or be a part of music production and write music and things like that. Yeah, so my parents, interestingly enough, are not musical people. Now, on my mom's side, I had these 3 or 4 uncles that were very much into music. And in fact, as kids, even back in Ukraine, we would listen to them play at weddings. And so we really wanted to be like them. Some people want to be like their dad. In the musical sense, I wanted to be like my uncles.
Воно якось передається, бо в нас завжди музика в хаті, завжди в нас магнітофон завжди включений був. Ми це. І так, видно, вже пішло, воно то діти полюбили музику.
In the same way that I looked up to my uncles for the musical aspiration, I looked up to my dad for the work ethic. Because immediately after we immigrated, maybe 2 months, 3 months into it, he actually went out and got a job.
Моя задача – виростити тут дітей, підняти дітей. Коли я їхав на роботу, і я знав, мені дуже тяжко було на душі, все нове, мову я ще не дуже знав, але я знав, за мною 8 children, 8 дітей, and wife, і жінка. За мною моя армія. І вони на папу полагаються, надіються, що у нас папа привіз. І це мені давало вдушевлення і сили далі.
My dad is a huge hero of mine when it comes to showing me how to make something of myself and how to work and how to provide for the family. I was the pioneer in our family when it came to music, so I picked up the keyboard when I was about 12 or 13 years old. I would go over to my grandma's house in the summers, which was in Denver, Colorado, and I'd stay there for like 2 months for my summer breaks. And that's where I actually started to really learn how to compose songs and make arrangements and things like that. And my uncles, which had all this gear, this was at my grandma's house, they would let me use it during the day while they were at work. So very grateful to them that they didn't just shoo me off and say, don't touch our stuff, because it was expensive things, but they trusted me. And then as the years went on, all my younger brothers, most of them followed. So, one would pick up the guitar, one would pick up the bass. The other was like, well, guitar and bass are taken. I got to do drums. And it was interesting how it just kind of naturally fell into place like that. It was one of those things where one thing led to another. I didn't really wake up one day saying, I need to open a business. It was little steps. And now I realize, looking back at it, that all these different things that I did, we would be involved in music production, and then my brothers toured, and I would tour with them as kind of their production guy. So I'd mix front of house monitors, fix the bus, whatever needed to be done. I just saw that all those things kind of came together, and the culmination was basically starting 1964 ears.
Everybody wanted in-ear monitors, and they were so expensive. We just couldn't afford it. And just rolling down the Guitar Center, I saw something that caught my eye, and I bought those Universal UEs. After taking them completely apart, I've noticed that the drivers inside were exactly the ones they would use on IEMs. And I completely took the thing apart and put it in a little Ziploc bag. And in recording studio where they were recording Briggs' album, I pulled out because I was super excited. And the guys, check it out. Look what I have and look what I found out. And that's when I saw the spark in Vitaly's eyes.
Vitaly started tinkering, in his bedroom back in like 2000, maybe 2010, and he like took existing universal in-ears and then would kind of crack open and use the drivers to put into a custom shell.
And really, if I back up back to 2004, that's when I bought my first pair of custom in-ears. And I remember this like yesterday when they came in the mail. I literally took them to bed with me, and I think I fell asleep with them in, just listening to music. The first time I looked at a custom in-ear, I was just mesmerized. I needed to know how this thing worked. How could such a little thing house so much technology, and how could it provide this sound in my head? I was very fascinated. In fact, the first thing that I thought about is like, I want to cut them open and see how they work. Now, I spent too much money for me to tear into them. Years later, that pair actually broke, and I did end up cutting into them because I needed to harvest the components so I could remake them into my wife's shape ears.
And so he was like, let me just figure out if I can like redo these into your ear. And so he had like called around and I think found an audiologist that was willing to do it. And the guy sent it back. And I just still remember, we look at it now, he did such a bad job.
I guess if you want to sum it up, 1964 ears started because Vitaly Belanoshko was a little bit too stingy to buy his beloved wife a brand new set.
I think it spurred that idea in him of like, hey, this guy did it. We paid him to do it. And like, I could at least do this. Like I could at least remold stuff and like, let's just at least start there. And so slowly but surely this little lab started to form, and out of an office became all these like little pieces started to just appear.
My wife worked at a university back then, and she was basically bringing home the bacon while I stayed at home and tinkered. Now, what really helped me shortly after I started was an order for 10 sets that came from a church down in Sacramento. Again, it was through a connection, I think, with a friend. And I remember getting that money in my PayPal and saying, okay, that's $3,000. We're gonna, we're living it up now. I have $3,000. I can now buy the materials. I can now, kind of expand a little bit and obviously deliver that order. But that was, in my mind, that's what really kickstarted the company, is when I got that order of 10, I think they were triple drivers. And I remember I would have all these chemicals and bottles of acrylic and all my drilling equipment. And at some point I ran out of room in our second bedroom, and I would spill over into the kitchen, and I took over our dinner table. And that's when she said, you got to move out, as in move your business out. The rumor out there that I've heard numerous times is that, I went to go work for one of the in-ear companies, and then somehow I deserted and started my own thing. But that's actually not true. I looked everywhere I could for information. And so it took me a couple of years to really figure out how to put the first one together. The initial journey was literally just pulling information from videos. In fact, some video was released by a competitor that I looked at and I said, oh, that's how they do that. My brother Roman, who is a big guitar fanatic, and he was one of the brothers in the band. The year 1964 really appealed to him because, again, he's a huge fan of vintage stuff. And Roman comes over one day and says, well, why don't you call it 1964 Ears?
And where I'm like, I love vintage stuff, and like one of my favorite guitars is made in the 1964 year. It's a Fender Stratocaster from 64. And I'm like, hey, let's just put 1964, and that kind of vintage theme kind of stuck around. And then when Vitaly was, starting to create ears, he took that name, 1964 Ears.
It's an iconic year in music history where my brother felt like was the kind of an explosion of a lot of different things. The Beatles had like 13 number one hits that year. Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. we gravitated towards kind of that vintage sound where it was true, it was inspiring, it was musical.
As we started looking for somewhere to rent, that was, I think, the point where we were like, whoa, like this is actually something's coming of this. This is no longer a hobby. Like this has to start earning something to, you know, because we have to upkeep even this rent, which I remember, I think you were like, if I just make one a day, you know, like we could be okay, like we could cover home expenses in this rental.
We're in front of the building that used to be the very first lab for 1964 ears. You know, at the time when I was looking to move out of my apartment, this kind of was the only thing that was available. And so I remember making that first move and actually taking all my gear and all my chemicals and moving out into this little lab. I remember thinking that, how am I going to pay, you know, for some little suite? I mean, that was a huge leap of faith for me because I didn't really have customers back then. All I had was this idea, and at that time I had already built sets for my friends, so I used them as guinea pigs to kind of test the product, see what the response is, and wanted to make sure it was, you know, going to hold up and things like that.
It's funny because, you know, in the early days, everyone just knew we were just figuring it out as we went, and it was like there was no plan. We were just going, and it was like, hey, let's just see what happens.
The first employee actually was my wife's brother, Alexei, and I remember, you know, asking him to help me. He didn't really have any experience in in-ears. I needed someone to basically answer emails, take the phone calls, bill people, you know, kind of do the customer service part of it.
You know, he was focused on his thing. So for us, it was a lot of just figure it out. You know, what's the best way we can do this? And you were pretty much given, you know, free reign to put everything together. You know, there were expectations, but you built a lot of it from the ground up.
Shortly after I got started, my brothers, who were musicians at the time, doing the music thing, touring the country, slowly came one by one, and they each, just like in the band, each one kind of picked up a skill, and they learned very quickly because it was natural to us to learn new things very quickly.
At the beginning, like I was really happy to actually have like somewhat of a real job because we were traveling with our band and we were kind of paying off debt and because albums costed a lot to make.
Because as many people know, when you're in a band, unless you made it, you probably don't have much money going around. I was like, it'd be nice to, you know, to start making a somewhat of a living.
How I got interested was I just kind of showed up. My brothers were working with my brother Vitali. Me and him had a chat, and I was just telling him about how I'd like to, you know, just kind of give a helping hand around the place.
So one of the first things that I did was I helped Vitali create like a little promo video.
Hi, I'm Vitali. I'm owner and designer of 1964 ears.
We just kind of filmed the process of him making the ears, and then I kind of interviewed Vitali and have him talk about the products and stuff, and I guess that was kind of the first thing that I did with Vitali for the 1964 ears. One of the things that was a little bit difficult is trying to get them to show up on time to work. Being band people, they would show up maybe 11:30 because that was like musician clock, right? You would stay up and you would come in at noon. That was your morning. You know, they improved as time went on. They understood that this was more serious than just, you know, a little hobby. And at some point, we had 11 people from my family working in the business. To be honest with you, I didn't really call them over. They kind of came by themselves. I think it was kind of a mutual thing where I needed help and they saw an opportunity. So little by little, they came and got involved in the business.
It was definitely a positive where we were very close, obviously know each other well, and we could easily bounce ideas off each other.
Я подзвонив і кажу, Талік, а може мене візьми на роботу до себе? Ти на роботі мій бос, а я дома вже твій батько.
Yeah, I'm working with my dad. I've been his boss for a little bit here, which is a very interesting dynamic. It hasn't been a problem or anything, but yeah, I remember years ago, he like sees me staying up late or something. He's just like, "Go to sleep. You know, you gotta wake up." And I'm like, "Dad, I'm your boss." Just kind of both look at each other. We're like, okay, we both not.
He keeps an eye out on things in the company. You know, he's kind of that shadow. We call him the Godfather at our company. He kind of gave himself that nickname.
Компанія мого сина це і моя компанія. Я за неї також переживаю. І молюсь, і совітую, що можу, і роблю те, що від мене залежить.
І компанія нас об'єднає, як то кажуть, вже. Там, я хоч я там, ну, як сказати, я там сама менша вбираю, але я довольна, що я там працюю.
It was like, yeah, we're a family, but at the same time, we're in a company with non-family members. And so it's probably one of the hardest things to keep that balance of like, hey, not having feel like people that are not family are being treated different than family.
Definitely exhausted all of the family options first before we even brought people that were, you know, from outside the family.
I heard about 1964 ears back at the time when I was in a church band, I guess. I thought I would really enjoy working here because in my mind I thought maybe I can work my way up the company and get involved on a level that I would really enjoy. It was right at the transition of 1964 ears into 64 audio.
One of the things that gave me a good idea of what market to get into is my background. So being a Christian and growing up in the church and actually working at a church before I started the business, I realized that there was a need for an affordable custom in-ear monitor for the house of worship market.
It was a very easy product to sell. You basically, I never had to sell anything. People would call me, you know, tell me what to get. You know, I have the funds. I've heard great things about you.
We took this concept of kind of guerrilla marketing and implemented it into our marketing, where I would go out to shows with a camera and a microphone, and we would kind of have the band step aside after sound check, and I'd just give them the mic, hey, say a few words about the in-ears. And that was something that we kind of really kind of pioneered. And for me, like, I thought, hey, like, we need to have the artists themselves tell people how amazing these in-ears are.
Not having a marketing budget, we didn't do any trade shows in the beginning. In fact, we didn't even know how that stuff worked. We didn't even know why you would want to go to a trade show. And then as the overseas markets started to be interested in us, they kept asking us, are you going to be at these shows to show the product? And so the very first show that we decided to do was the 2012 RMAF in Denver. And there's a portion of it that's called Can Jam. It's dedicated to headphones and in-ears. And an interesting thing that I vividly remember from the show is that was the show where I met Jerry Harvey. And that was an interesting conversation / confrontation. So at the show, as I'm walking around and listening to competitors' products, and, you know, it's normal to do such a thing, and then approached and saw Jerry Harvey, and so I introduced myself, and Jerry Harvey got upset because he also was walking around and saw that we released the 6-driver product. The conversation turned unpleasant because he was upset, clearly. And so I remember that trade show was very, very emotional for me because of what had happened, you know, and I didn't know that a couple years later, we'd actually get hit with a lawsuit based on that 6-driver product. It was one of those things where, you know, starting your own business was hard enough, but dealing with the lawsuit literally 4 years into it was another challenge that, you know, lasted for 5 years. Because we were the underdog in the early days, we felt like we needed to really, you know, infiltrate the industry. It took a lot of work to convince people to give our product a try. One of the first memorable ones was when I was pursuing this gentleman by the name of Jeff Nolte. Now, Jeff Nolte was at the time the monitor engineer for a Christian band called Newsboys. And for about 2 years, I kept just hounding this guy to try to get him to listen to the product. One day I get this message and he says, look, I'm making myself a pair of impressions. I'm gonna make an extra set, send it to you so you can show me what you've got. Built him a set and I sent it in, and like 2 days later, you know, I get an email from him. Oh my goodness, what are you doing there? How are you able to make this sound this way?
I'm Jeff Nolte with the Newsboys. I'm a monitor engineer here with my good friend Vitaly. Just want to let you know that these guys make the finest in-ear product I have heard. Just want to let you know, if you've never heard their product, you have got to get some in your head.
And so that was what really kicked off our artist endorsements. I really feel like the first 5 years we were playing catch up to where I felt the industry was at. We felt like we needed to prove ourselves. We needed to work 10 times harder and to say, hey, you know, we can do this just as well as our competitors, if not better.
For a while, I didn't have a car, so I'd ride a motorcycle to work. And we would always end up finishing up loads of orders at the very end of the day that had to be like, get right to the like the main sorting facility right next to our airport for our to get the earphones out. And on days, you know, I'd ride the motorcycle. There would basically be a huge garbage bag on the back of my motorcycle with, I don't know, thousands of dollars worth of earphones. And I would just be hammering it to get there before the cutoffs.
I get this email from one of my employees that sends me a link to something called the Adele technology. It's a technology that introduces a second eardrum that basically takes the beating from the drivers and lets your natural biological eardrum, you know, be relaxed. I had gotten in touch with Stephen Ambrose and Azius Technology, which is his company. You know, I wasn't going to wait till I came back. I wanted to find out more about it from Israel, where I was at the time. Part of me said, we need this because we need to differentiate ourselves. We need to stand apart from the crowd. As Stephen came over and we listened and I experimented with the technology, and I was blown away by what we could do and what it did to the sound of the earphone. And so we began that relationship.
I guess, you know, we trusted Vitaly that we would take out of this technology that he has to improve our in-ears. And I remember, I guess that was kind of the first time where we kind of were realizing that we're not a small company anymore. We're going to be playing with the big boys now.
Once we adopted Adele, I feel like that gave us an amazing boost. One of the challenges I distinctly remember after we launched Adele is that competitors were basically saying that it's fake science. Because one of the questions that was posed to us, well, if it's so good, how come everyone's not jumping on it? Our types of companies, they're very small. They're usually run by the founder, who's also the product designer. And so for you to say, hey, I couldn't really come up with something on my own, I'm going to go and license this. And by the way, all of my competitors are licensing it. It's not a very attractive idea. When we adopted Adele, is that our price literally grew 2x, 2.5x of the product overnight. You know, we were a little bit naive. We again just dove in head first, and I was just really excited about the idea. One of the things that I think we didn't think about was an exit strategy with Adele technology, because nothing lasts forever. You know, business plans change, businesses change, and strategies change. And so if I learned anything from that situation is you always have to think about how are you going to exit it. We were 100% reliant on an outside vendor with no backup. And so it became difficult to be in that position. We had to part ways, you know, and it wasn't pleasant because we had plastered Adele over everything we did. We really poured our heart and soul into it because, again, I really got behind this idea. And so when we needed to develop a technology in-house that we would have 100% control over, that's where Apex was born. In early 2015, we decided that, to communicate that we were now a more premium brand, we felt that we needed to change the name. Some people speculated that it was because we got sued in December of 2014. Really, the motivation behind the rebrand was to say that, hey, we're different now. We are now going into the premium audio category.
I felt that it was basically expanding our ability to produce different products under the 64 Audio brand.
I remember that dropping the 19 and doing just 64, and we promoted a little bit and kind of let people know that things are changing over, and it was actually a really smooth transition.
We felt like that the name 64 Audio would give us a better platform for future products that we were going to bring. So early 2015 was a pretty monumental year. There was a lot of changes in the company that happened. Some friends of mine, Truth Custom Drums, sent me this email saying, hey, would you like to be at NAMM? And just have people, as they come to our booth, have people listen to your product. And so I technically snuck into NAMM that year. I wasn't officially on the, in the registry, didn't actually register with NAMM. But I remember that was the year that we released the V8 product. And I wanted to get the feedback of musicians and sort of get my foot in the door. It was good. It was a positive response because the next year we actually came in and rented a 10 by 10 space, which is tiny compared to what we do now. But that's when we presented the Adele technology. NAMM for us is that big thing that happens every year where we kind of, we stop everything we're doing. We really worked hard to up the experience every year. We get a lot of feedback at these shows, not only just on the product, but just on the brand in general. So it's always a special time, and it's a huge amount of effort, but it's always worth it.
Yo, what's up, everybody? This is Eric Moore, drummer for Suicidal Tendencies, and I just have to tell you, 1964 ears are amazing. I love my 1964s. Yo, if you can, get you a pair. Let's go.
Here's the NAMM experience for her. I'm gone for literally a week.
Oh no, you're gone for 2 weeks before
Oh,
NAMM.
okay, yeah.
You're catching
All right,
up 2
hold
weeks
on.
after.
Correction. I'm gone for 3 weeks straight. That's her experience of NAMM.
Yes.
When I started 1964 Ears, the honest truth about it is I had no business plan. But looking back at it, I wanted to do something great. In the beginning, it was about designing product and, coming up with these great ideas and building the first few hundred sets. It became a bunch of other things. When I think of an organization, it's really people. And that has been the most challenging part is the relationships. And so from the broken relationships, from the partnerships that fell apart, through kind of the struggles of growing. And that was a challenge for me.
It kind of goes without saying, family doesn't really make the best business partners. It's hard to separate between when are you my brother and when are you my coworker type of thing.
This has been a place to offer people just a chance to grow, whether they stay or not. But there's just that level of they're given a chance, and again, Vitaly just sees beyond just the resume. He's very much I see this in you. This will be great in this position.
I came in, like I said, 9 years ago, not knowing really anything about manufacturing, anything like that. But I've always been willing to battle through, learn, whether it's here from other people here or outside of the company, just kind of research on my own. Very curious about kind of how things work now that I'm here.
The first early tasks that I was doing was actually sanding 3D printed shells. The first kind of official big step was when I started manning the 3D printers, essentially. To me, yeah, that was an important moment because that meant that to some degree I was trusted, and that was my chance to prove myself.
We never thought we would be in that position. I mean, we were just, again, I'm just a guy with a soldering iron just trying to repair some earphones, and out of that blossoms this thing. I mean, to me, that's super humbling. And to see that community where people, became friends here, people learned skills that, to be honest with you, a couple of people went out and started their own IAM companies. I can't say that has been personally my accomplishment. It's been an accomplishment of the collective effort that we call 64 Audio. It's never been about the money. It's been about growing in the talents that God has given me. And again, it's letting other people flourish around you. Because if it's only you, you're doing something wrong.
It's been interesting because there have been some low lows for sure. And in other relationships, there's been more of a bonding. So it's almost this interesting thing where it's not all relationships have been broken.
The biggest thing I think is just you can take things so personally because it is family. So again, what the weight of the words are going to be heavier, so it just it'll impact you more.
I don't regret the journey because it has helped me to look forward to the next 10 years. I think I am a better husband because of it. I think I'm a better brother because now, having gone through the relationships, the strained relations with my siblings, I think I value them more. And if I ever get a chance to work with them again, I think it will be better.
It's really cool now to see that it's not forever severed. You're starting to see like, okay, there's some healing happening, and maybe now that everyone, whatever they learned, whatever they needed to at 64 and moved on to do their thing and are succeeding in it, and that's great.
Initially, when the COVID thing happened, I did feel for some time like the rug was pulled from underneath me and the 64 Audio family, and we were shut down for over a month, and that was difficult because we couldn't provide the level of service to our customer that we really wanted to. But one of the things that became very apparent is that, especially with a situation like the pandemic and the decline of the pro audio industry, it really forced us to look at what are the other revenue streams. And so we are now gearing up for products that really address the stay-at-home kind of culture and the work-from-home culture. As a business owner, I've recognized that we need to reposition a little bit and really address that market.
I want 64 Audio to reach a bigger pool of people. Step outside the strictly the musicians and performers and enter the world of consumers. It's hard to say what the next great or big thing is, or what it will be, because there's so many things that could be, and sometimes you don't even get the idea for it until you're in the middle of making something and you're like, oh wow, this could be this, and your whole direction changes.
As I look back on the last 10 years, the things that I'm most proud of is just the community that has been built here at 64 Audio.
Very, very proud that we managed to hold it together through just, tough times. Yeah, it's just amazing to see new product launches, just how Vitaly continues to evolve, just the unique spins he puts on the technology that he's working with.
Я дуже радий, гордий в нас не прийнято казати, хоча гордість – це радість. за моїх дітей всіх. Но я признаю, що це успіх від Бога. Це благословіння Боже.
I look at the 64 Audio journey starting way back, even before I launched the company, because what really drove me to do this is my passion for music.
I just love seeing him in something he loves. And then again, he does it so well, and that's just who he is. He just, whatever he takes on, he will do it 110%.
This is an expression of what God has gifted me to do. And I'm grateful for all the moments. I'm grateful to all the people that have contributed over the years.
There was some very skilled people, very dedicated people that went through the company that just a pleasure to work with for me.
It's a great thing that happened with 64 Audio, and even though with all the unperfect people that we are, we created some amazing stuff, and I think 64 Audio is going to continue to create.
I'm very appreciative, and I really value those early customers that bought our product when we were basically nobody. And I'm extremely humbled to do this, and I'm very grateful to my family, grateful to my wife. You know, Lord willing, we'll be doing this 10 years from now, and be, you know, just as involved and just be as passionate about building the best in-ear products in the world.